Shalom. All praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Racha, Quadash. Double honors to my elder apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone, who taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed line of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom, beginning with the 144,000 prophets, and Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai willing. This lesson is edifying and informative. My name is Quanawath, and this is the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall heat her flesh, and burn her with fire. In the news from the RT, our Europe could die. Macron. The EU must prove that it is not a vassal of the United States. The French president has said in a keynote speech. Now, what is a vassal? A vassal, from Wikipedia, or a liege subject, and the word subject means under the rule. Sub means under, and ject means rule. Is a person regarded as having a mutual obligation to a lord or monarch in the context of the feudal system in medieval Europe. While the subordinary party is called a vassal, the dominant party is called a suzerain, if I pronounced that correctly. The rights and obligations of a vassal are called vassalage, while the rights and obligations of a suzerain are called suzerainty, if I pronounced that correctly. In other definitions, a person or country in a subordinate position to another. From Latin, medieval Latin that is, vassalus, retainer. French President Emmanuel Macron has urged EU nations, including the ones in the Eurozone, I may add, to make decisive changes to secure the bloc's interests ahead of crucial parliamentary elections across the bloc. The U.S. cannot be relied on for protection, he warned. And so this is a warning from the French president that it is becoming more evident and clear that the United States cannot be relied on for protection. Opinion polls are projecting that EU voters will shift towards right-wing nationalist politics in the European Parliament in the European Parliament elections in early June. Macron called for significant policy changes as he addressed his counterparts across the continent from the Sorbonne University, in Paris on Thursday. Our Europe today is mortal, and it can die, Macron warned. It can die, and this depends only on our choices. And really, it does not depend upon your choices, but rather upon the will of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. For as it is written, man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man understand his own way? A man may devise his own way, but the Lord directeth his steps, because the Lord seals a man's instructions while he is asleep in the evening. So the choice is not theirs to make, but rather the choice that they do make is based upon the will of Yahweh, the Supreme Almighty Yahweh, through His Son Yahweh Shai, our Lord. Because they have a role to play in the Lord's movie concerning biblical prophecy. Because they will eventually begin to break away from America, Babylon the Great. As Britain, through Brexit, had started several years ago. And eventually they're going to hate America, Babylon the Great. You're going to start to see more EU nations leave the EU. Just as Britain had left Brexit. Brexit stands for Britain's exit. Out of where? Out of the EU. In the past, there have been reports of Frexit, France's exit out of the EU. So expect to see things intensify further concerning biblical prophecy. Right? So it reads on to say, the French leader touted strategic autonomy for Europe, particularly in terms of military production. He reiterated that member states should spend more on defense and give priority to locally produced weapons, a suggestion that critics perceive as lobbying for French arms manufacturers. Macron said that this would reduce the continent's dependence on Washington. And so they are seeking to reduce their dependence on the United States. And again, eventually, they will betray America, Babylon the Great, according to biblical prophecy written of in Revelation, the 17th chapter, which I'd opened up with. Also recall the book of Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th chapter, either the 2nd or the 4th chapter, where it speaks about the 10 toes breaking apart. Toes that is mixed with part iron and miry clay. And is breaking apart, has been breaking apart gradually. And eventually, it will become a lot more evident that there are divisions, there are separations. And then they'll betray America. America will be the one to blame for all of the world's problems. The EU must show that it is never a vassal of the United States and that it also knows how to talk to all the other regions of the world, the president said. He also advocated a wider revision of policies on fair trade. manufacturing standards, and other areas that affect the competitiveness of European businesses. It cannot work if we are the only ones in the world to respect the rules of trade as they were written up 15 years ago. If the Chinese and Americans no longer respect them by subsidizing critical sectors, Macron declared. He labeled Russia's uninhabited behavior as a key threat to Europe. Moscow has argued that the EU has shot itself in the foot by following the US and joining what it regards as a proxy war against Russia, in one instance being waged in Ukraine. Macron's presidency will expire in 3 years. His political party, Renaissances, if I pronounce that correctly, lost its majority in the French parliament in 2022, while the right-wing National Rally Party, which is projected to win the EU elections in France in June, has threatened to demand dissolution of the national parliament should the president's centrist coalition suffer a crushing defeat in June. This concludes the article. So again, this is the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 16, another step closer to this prophecy. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, which the 10 horns represents the EU. The beast is the pagan Roman Empire, which came back in the form of NATO and the EU, with America being an extension of that empire. That is the beast. And so the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, which the whore is America, Babylon the Great. And they will hate the whore according to this biblical prophecy, and shall make her desolate and naked through thermonuclear fire, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So, according to biblical prophecy, America will be destroyed by thermonuclear fire. In other reports, also from the RT, Moscow issues diplomatic warning to Washington. Russia could downgrade relations with the U.S. if its assets are confiscated, the deputy foreign minister has warned. Moscow could downgrade diplomatic relations with Washington if the U.S. expropriates Russian assets. Pardon me. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, if I pronounce his name correctly, warned on Thursday the U.S. and its allies have frozen around $300 billion in Russian central bank assets as part of Ukraine-related sanctions, most of which are being held in the EU. Washington has long advocated for confiscating the funds so that the money would then be held over to Kyiv for its war efforts against Russia. The latest push came on Saturday after the U.S. House of Representatives approved a bill authorizing the confiscation of Russian money. The so-called Repo Act, which lawmakers in Washington passed last weekend, along with a $61 billion military aid package for Ukraine, authorized the U.S. president to confiscate Russian funds held in American banks and hand them over to Kyiv. More than $6 billion of the $300 billion in frozen Russian assets is sitting in U.S. banks. U.S. Senator Rand Paul, who is skeptical of the proposal, warned earlier this year that the move would be an act of economic war. Officials in several Washington nations, notably the U.S. and the U.K., have insisted on the outright confiscation of Russian assets despite widespread concerns that this would have no legal basis. In contrast, the EU has been reluctant to do so, purportedly fearing Russian retaliation. EU nations, which are holding the lion's share of the frozen funds, are reportedly concerned that expropriating the money would destabilize the euro. Moscow's response to the confiscation of its assets by the G7 countries could include economic and diplomatic countermeasures. Ryakov was cited by RIA Novosti as saying, "We are now studying the appropriate forms of reaction, where among the countermeasures there are actions against the assets of our Western opponents and diplomatic measures of response." Ryakov told the media outlet, "One does not cancel the other, but there are simply no solutions yet, because there are no solutions on the other side either," he added. The senior diplomat has previously warned that the U.S. should not act under an illusion that Russia is clenching with both hands diplomatically to diplomatic relations with that country. Moscow has repeatedly said the seizure of its assets would be theft. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has warned the U.S. will damage its own economy as well as the global financial system if it follows through on its threats to expropriate the funds and give them to Ukraine. This would be nothing short of a breakdown of all foundations of the global economic system, according to Peskov. And this concludes the article. And with that, I will end this lesson. Abu Raza, it has been edifying and informative, just letting the flock know what's going on across the globe.